Let's talk about this overwhelm that young people feel to make the right choice.
So this is an overwhelming question for young people in particular, but it can creep back up at any stage of your life, really. Does my very existence depend on me making the one right choice?
This is Life and Faith, a podcast where we seek to elevate the conversation about the things that matter, or should matter, deeply human questions about meaning, purpose, and hope. No matter what you believe, we hope you'll join us exploring the complexities, the struggles, and the joys of life and faith. Welcome to Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart.
And I'm Justine Toe.
Why is it so difficult to choose where to live, what to do with your life, what kind of person you might want to be? We're so overwhelmed by choice that we have a problem. How do we choose what to do and choose well? I have a lot of sympathy these days for young people especially. If things felt tough when I was their age, they're in an even more uncertain time. I see this with my kids and their friends, and they're facing such a variety of choices. At one level that's amazing and great, but from another sense it's completely overwhelming. It seems particularly cruel that the modern world is so full of options, but we can feel so adrift at the same time being confronted by all these choices.
Yeah, Life and Faith is tackling existential overwhelm.
You ever feel like this, Justine?
Yeah, all the time, especially for young people, but as will be made clear, it's for anyone really who's found themselves at a crossroads and having to weigh up one course of action over another.
Yeah, and I think perhaps it's so bad because there are some choices that really do feel like the Rubicon. You know, once you've crossed, there's no going back. That's the feeling anyway, even if it's not always actually the case.
But you don't know at the time.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's part of the torture.
So we need guides for life. But here again, there are so many guides, options, opinions. Our guest today has been something of a guide himself and a mentor for many students at Oklahoma Baptist University. Justine, you spoke with him?
Yeah. We're talking today with Alan Noble. He's an associate professor of English there, and he's also the author of several books, including, and how's this for a title, Simon? It's fantastic, On Getting Out of Bed, The Burden and Gift of Living.
Yeah, I love that.
But we are not talking to him about that today. We're actually discussing his latest book, To Live Well, Practical Wisdom for Moving Through Chaotic Times. And he dedicates this to his students. So you get the sense that there's a lot of conversations that he's talked about with them that have now flowed over into this book.
Yeah, we also spoke to a bunch of people who've had to make what feels like very weighty decisions of recent times, or to push through a difficult transition moment in their lives and felt the paralysis and fear of the unknown associated with that. And we'll hear from them a bit later in the show.
But I started by asking Alan whether he's written the book that he would have liked to have read as a younger person.
Yes, I think so. That transition from high school to college and also from college into the quote-unquote adults, the working world is a very difficult transition. And one of the things I've experienced as a teacher, one of my favorite parts of being a teacher at a college is that I have a lot of students that come to me to ask questions about what to do about life, how to live, as it were, which is the title of this book, To Live Well. And I get to speak into their lives and give them what I hope is wise counsel. And it would have been helpful to have more mentors in my life at that time. That would have been a great blessing. And I did have some.
The kinds of questions that you're dealing with, the need for guidance, perhaps young people are really feeling the pointy edge of that question, but this is something that everyone will have to deal with. There's a frequent phrase I feel in your book. It's, you can't wait for certainty before you act. And honestly, I really felt that. That was really speaking to me. And I wonder if part of the chaotic times of your title is such that so much feels unpredictable now. And so everyone is going to find themselves at some kind of inflection point that calls for them to make a choice.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. So the center target of this book is that 18 to 26, maybe 30-year-old range. But I wrote this feeling that a lot of people beyond that range are experiencing many of these same anxieties because, as you point out, uncertainty is beneath a lot of the questions that this book tries to bring answers to. Because, as you point out, a lot of what we're going through is what one philosopher calls liquid modernity. And what that means is everything is shifting under our feet. It creates actually this sense of anxiety in us because we're never quite sure if what we are doing or saying or how we are acting is morally acceptable, is proper, is just. What are we doing in this world?
I wonder if you could give us a quick tour guide around the conditions that are causing that uncertainty. What does liquid modernity look like on the ground in terms of the choices that are facing people and the uncertainty that they feel?
Well, for a lot of people, what this looks like is an overabundance of choices. And this is a blessing, particularly in the modern West, in industrialized and highly technological countries. We have a lot of choices. And so we launch out into the world or whatever stage you're at in your life, you often have a lot of choices in the jobs you apply for, the careers you apply for, or what you want to do with your life, who you want to date, who you want to marry. And that's a wonderful thing, but it's also an overwhelming thing. And this includes also who you want to be, your lifestyle options, right? What does it mean to be a person? How do you want to identify yourself? All these questions they're up in the air. And so this becomes overwhelming. You experience what is called choice paralysis, where you freeze up. One person I talked to experienced this with buying toothbrushes. She said to me, when I go into the supermarket, I just want to buy a toothbrush, but I see this huge aisle of toothbrushes. And I want to make the morally right choice. But one says it's best for the environment, and one says it's best for my teeth, and one says it's dentist approved, and I don't know which is the right choice. And so I don't buy anything, right? And so that's what's happening, except it's not just buying a toothbrush. It's what am I doing with my life? So it's an existential question. That's overwhelming. It's just utterly overwhelming. And so we get this crushing burden of how do we act? How do we move in the world? So that's one aspect of this. On the other hand, we have the collapse of social and moral norms. Across the board in the West, we've moved from a place where there are accepted moral and social norms that we have shared values, shared cultural norms, for better and for worse, whatever stance you want to take on that. We have moved from that to a place where things are shifting. And instead, what you have is you have one TikTok guru telling you this is the way to live. You have somebody on YouTube telling you it's another way to live. You have your teachers telling you here's a third way to live. You have your parents pressuring you to live a fourth way. You have somebody in an ad telling you to live a fifth way. And you have scientists telling you 1 week to live one way, and another week the new data says you have to live another way. And so there's this constant pressure to figure out which voice is the proper voice to listen to. And so you have between choice paralysis and the cacophony of voices telling you which way to live, you're just feeling a constant sense that there's uncertainty about what it means to live well. And that produces anxiety and distress.
We'll come back to Alan in a moment, but for now, let's put some flesh on the bones of what he's describing here. The difficulty of working out which voice to listen to, and how this is quite stressful when you're in that transition to adulthood and making decisions for yourself. So, meet Brody, who's 21 years old. He'd started a combined economics law degree, but about midway through, started to get a sense that it might not be the best fit for him.
I was about 2 years in of the 5-year degree, and I was starting to get a little bit, uncomfortable with the idea of going into the corporate world. I wasn't sure if that's what I actually wanted to do. Whether it was maybe not social enough or didn't have enough individual, actual tangible purpose for me. I was just thinking I want to do something with a bit more purpose, but tangible purpose. I know that you can get purpose out of anything, but I think going and doing something like a Master of Teaching, which is what I wanted to do, you can make an actual impact tangibly on someone's life so clearly. In the corporate sense, it's a bit more indirect. It's a few more steps until you make that impact, where you still can get purpose and make impact. But teaching, I can see a student every single week. I can believe in that student. I can encourage that student and actually see their life change because of that. And yeah, I think that was just a really beautiful idea to me.
Did you have a sense of, I've started this and
Oh,
I should really stick with it?
definitely. I think my grandma told me, she's like, a law degree is really good, Brody. Like, you should do that. You should get that done. And my dad as well was like, I think you should just complete the 5 years and do the master's after. But I was like, that's a long time, like 3 more years of study. I definitely had that pull of like, maybe I should just finish this and get it done. But then I was like, it's so expensive. I don't realistically see myself doing that as a job. What's the point of finishing it?
Like a lot of other people I spoke to, Brody consulted a range of people. So who was really helpful?
My mum was really good. She was like, look, I think the fact that you're asking these questions and you're so interested and pulled to this kind of shows what you're actually feeling in your heart. The main reason you're holding back from changing is kind of that sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, I've already done 2 years, I may as well just keep going. That kind of shows that it's not actually the content, it's not actually the job. It's really just, I've invested a bit into this. So you do want to go and do teaching. Maybe just, cut out the law part of your degree, finish the economics, and then go do the teaching so you can get it done. Because it kind of, what you're saying and presenting these questions to me is showing to me that you actually know what you want to do. You're just nervous about the path of taking it.
Do you have a sense that you've got a small window in order to really make a decision, and then after that your life is sort of in a groove?
Yeah.
And is that part of the stress?
Yeah, definitely. I think you make this small decision, which is really just clicking something on a computer screen, and that changes the trajectory of your life for a long time. And yes, you can go and change things, but that takes time to go study and retrain. So I think I definitely feel that weight and that burden of, I'm doing this. My life is actually going to change. If I'm blessed to have children, their life has changed because of this as well. Like, there is so much impact of this decision. Yeah, like it feels like it, even though it's just, I'm just changing out of this degree. Like, in a very macro sense, you look at that, you're like, well, you're not doing that much, Brody. Like, come on. But I do feel the weight of like, wow, my life trajectory is so different, and it could be going, off this path, but now it's going off this path. And I feel that way. And it does make me nervous of the what if, again, like what if this path, this trajectory was the better way to go and the more fulfilling way to go.
We'll hear from Brody later to find out what happened. For now, let's get back to Alan. You can hear in what Brody said the pressure young people feel when they're at some kind of crossroads to make the right choice. So Justine asked Alan what he said to young people in a similar situation.
So this is an overwhelming question for young people in particular, but it can creep back up in middle life or at any stage of your life, really. Does my very existence depend on me making the one right choice? So, for example, a student comes to me and says, I want to choose the right major, or I want to choose the right career, or I want to decide whether to follow my fiance to grad school or stay with my current job, but I have to figure out whether or not this is the one right choice for me, or this is the one right person to marry, because if I don't make the right choice, I'm afraid my life will be a failure, or I will be a failure. And behind that, what they're saying is that their very existence itself is at risk. And what I like to remind them of is, a lot of my students that I work with are Christian. And so for them, what I try to help them understand is when we are facing these challenges, our lives are not determined by what we do in this life only. If this is the only life that we have to live, then we have to make it as exciting and as powerful and as meaningful as possible. But if this life is not the only thing, then our task before God is just to make a wise choice and walk that out.
What if, I'm sure you would have come across students who aren't Christian, let's say.
Yeah.
How do you talk about that with them?
Yeah.
Maybe they do feel that burden of, I only live once, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I would encourage them that there's a reason that they are experiencing this existential anxiety. And I think it's partially because our society has made this a part of their identity. That society has said to be a human being, you have to achieve certain things. And for your life to be meaningful and valuable, you have to achieve certain things. And I don't think that's fundamentally true. I think that is a myth that society has placed on our shoulders in order to make us self-sufficient, autonomous. And I just think that that is a myth. And so I would suggest to them that they are buying into a myth about autonomy that is just not true.
Yeah, so you're offering a rival account of what it means to be human, one that doesn't kind of rely on people's CV, I suppose.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'd love to hear you reflect on how you feel this existential overwhelm kind of hits differently for young men versus young women.
I think that many young people today, and older people, but particularly young people, are struggling with the experience of inadequacy and inhibition. So these two challenges that work together. So you feel inadequate to act because you feel this existential overwhelm. You feel like your whole life is up to you to figure out and to fix and to make powerful and meaningful and exciting. And so you feel inadequate. And then what's the response? Inhibition. You stop acting. Okay? And so what does this look like for young men? Well, in my experience, what this looks like for young men is they feel like the goal is to be a provider and a protector, and they look at society and the options that have been given to them. And at least in the US, we don't do a good job educating young men. And so they're not very well equipped to be successful in school, in colleges. And so they feel unprepared, they feel unequipped. And so they struggle with feelings of inadequacy, and then they feel inhibited, and they feel that existential overwhelm, and they can freeze up. And that can come out in feelings of frustration, of bitterness. It can come out in a lot of negative coping mechanisms, unfortunately, and some really unhealthy ways. And it can come out in positive ways where they reflect and say, what are the steps I need to take to change this situation and to get on the track of improving and getting an education and getting into a place where I can be that person that I desire to be for someone, right? And for young women, they're often in this bind where on the one hand, they're told you can be whatever you want to be, but they're also, in my experience with a lot of young women that I'm working with, they also want to have families. They also want to get married. And they find themselves looking for spouses and having a difficulty finding spouses. They find themselves overeducated compared to their spouses because of what I just talked about, the fact that a lot of young men are not getting educated at the same rate. That's just a statistical fact in America.
It's here in Australia as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a reality, right? So there's a mismatch, right? And so they find themselves struggling. And so there's this feeling of inadequacy, which they shouldn't have to feel. Like they feel like I've been educated, I've done what I'm supposed to do, but now if I strive too hard, somebody's going to accuse me of being a girl boss, which is supposed to be a negative thing, but it's not. So there's shaming for being successful, which is awful, but there's shaming if you underachieve. So it's like, which is
win.
it? Yeah, you can't win, right? And so each has it in different ways, but it's really fascinating to me and unfortunate.
I don't know if I've ever necessarily identified with the term girl boss, but I guess some would say that I am a bit of one.
We'll return to Justine's interview with Alan Noble later, but we're about to hear from 3 other people sharing a bit about life's big decisions that they've navigated recently. Let's start with Sophia, who's 22 years old and who you just heard.
Sophia studied psychology at uni, but decided not to pursue the expected pathway of becoming a clinical psychologist. Instead, she wanted to use her experience in the corporate world. She'd already been working part-time for a charity in a role unrelated to psychology. But taking the next step to move into a full-time role related to her degree proved very challenging.
I applied for jobs for a full year. Like I started in January and it kind of got to November and I still had nothing. And I was terrified. I actually looked the other day. I think I applied for 180 jobs in the space of a year. And I would have days set aside where I would just write cover letter after cover letter. I put time, I put effort in, and it hurts. Those rejection letters, it feels really personal. Now I'm in recruitment and I know how not personal it is. I think having that experience also, it humanizes the other side from the recruitment perspective as well. And so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, the rejections hurt. The lack of sureness of myself and the decision that I made was terrifying. I think as a 22-year-old, you're not sure of yourself anyway. And then to kind of make decisions that feel like they're pointing the trajectory of your life is, yeah, it feels like a heavy weight.
Now, Sophia knew that anyone embarking on this next phase of job hunting would find it confronting and destabilising. Yet it was still incredibly difficult.
I've always been of the mindset that good things are difficult, and if you're making these choices, it is going to be hard, and it's about how you approach it. It's about preparing yourself and being aware of your circumstances, also being self-reflective in the sense of, okay, this is hard and it feels difficult now, but how can I break it down to make it a better way to understand step by step? And then also making sure that I had a fantastic support system all throughout uni, and even now I had friends to rely on, I had colleagues at work, and I had really good family that were happy to just listen if I needed to have a yarn, but also would be people that would give me advice or ask me questions that maybe I was too scared to ask myself.
As with Brodie, Sophia's mum was a real help to her, but it was also challenging for Sophia to field some very difficult questions from her, especially as those rejection letters kept coming.
I love and I respect my mum, and she has such wisdom and such insight, but also I think her career moves have been very different to the ones that I was intentionally trying to make and even am now trying to make. And so having her ultimately want what's best for me, but maybe my idea of that and her idea of that weren't the same at the time, and trying to not convince her, but get her to understand that we were on the same page. I needed to be able to continuously self-reflect and also kind of reconcile my thought process all through that. And so having my mum there to kind of explain that to, but also to have her challenge me and go, why are you so sure of this? Why is this what you want to see for your future and for your life? What does that actually look like? What happens if it doesn't work out? What happens if I don't get a job at the end of the year? What does that mean? That was a question that I was really scared to confront because the idea of not having a backup plan was terrifying.
If you thought that getting your first job in your field of study was hard, wait till you hear what happened to Jordan, a 25-year-old woodwork teacher. He'd been living and teaching in Newcastle in New South Wales, but moved interstate with his wife, assuming he'd get a job quite easily. He did, but then the real challenge came after that.
I started in a job that I realised within a month or two of being there probably wasn't the right fit for me. There was a lot of politics and I found that quite difficult. Every afternoon I'd get home, I'd try and de-stress through a bunch of different ways, mainly watching TV, to try and get out of my head and focus on something else. And I wanted to leave mid to late year. I got another job, kind of a support role in teaching. So I took a step down out of teaching to leave that job. I kind of lost a little bit of confidence in my capacity as a teacher in that support role that wasn't consistent with my qualifications.
How did you grapple with that mismatch you felt between your qualifications and then the situation that you were in?
Trying to find an alternative job to go to proved very difficult. And I think part of the reason it was as difficult as it was is because I was undergoing a lot of stress. I was trying to kind of run away from that stress a bit. And when I would go to interviews, I think that was the main feeling that was probably coming across. So I wasn't necessarily desirable applicant because I was running away from my other situation. I was a teacher in a niche subject that there wasn't many teachers anymore of. So interviewing at maybe 4 or 5 different jobs and them all saying no to me, I was kind of left feeling like a blow to my confidence, a bit of grappling with my identity going, oh, am I really good at this? Or am I just, inflated sense of expertise in this area?
So Jordan had found himself in a support role, a backward career step, and applying for jobs to try to get back to where he wanted to be job-wise. As you can imagine, he felt quite anxious about the whole process. But he did have someone to help him think and feel his way through.
So I had a social work therapist who was my person that I would run things past. I don't think going to those therapy sessions was erasing any of the stress that I was experiencing by any means, but it was helpful in reframing the events that happened and making sure that I didn't have the wrong perspective on things and being able to create a perspective that was able to help me move forward.
We won't keep you in suspense with Jordan. He ended up getting a job about 3 weeks before I spoke to him.
It's one of those bittersweet experiences because even after having got the job, signed the contract, it's an ongoing position, I'm kind of like feeling this sense of overwhelm about doing the job, in knowing that it's something I've done before, something I'm very good at. So that's definitely not the issue, but it's just this, over the past year, just this up and down roller coaster that's kind of beated the confidence down a little bit. So I'm probably going to start the job feeling like I finally crossed the finish line, but it's a new marathon that I have to run. So one of the things I'm being deliberate about is that I kind of will need to get to a point, hopefully in the session with my therapist, where I can gain some level of, okay, we're starting again. This is good. I don't need to feel like I have to carry any of the baggage from the last place into this. And I can recreate that picture of what I'm like as a teacher.
You're listening to Life and Faith, and we're talking about the difficulty of making a choice in a world oversaturated with choices and where we feel responsible for making our lives go well. So far, we've heard about how young people have faced various trials of what to study or the stressful process of getting a job. And we'll check back in later with Brodie, Sophia and Jordan. Our next guest, however, found herself navigating a very different life circumstance. Meet Anna. There's been a lot of unexpected change in her life lately. She's 43 years old and 8 months pregnant after having married at 40.
I was looking for a partner. I wanted to get married. So it was something that I was pursuing. But of course, when it came to the time to make the decision, I'm a believer, and for me, it's a big part. So I wanted God to be involved, like to be sure that this person, not the marriage, but this person was God's will for me. So that took thinking, pondering, getting advice from people that I trust. My brain side, of course, weighing pros, cons, how is it going to look like? And yeah, it was a process. Very scary at the time, but also at the end, exciting.
So the struggle for you wasn't so much to do with what it would mean to be married versus be single. It was more that you were wanting to be sure that this was the path you should take.
Yes. I was aware that many changes will come, but at the time I wasn't worried much about it. I knew that the unknown was a big factor in it, and also because of the size of the decision. For me, it means a lifetime commitment. Is not like taking a job that you can quit next day if you don't like it, like something that you can fix if you make the wrong decision. But in a marriage, it was like a huge commitment.
That was the first decision. The second decision was whether or not to have a baby.
Of course, because I got married later in life, I had already been through a sort of a process of grieving, having children. Like I sort of made my mind up that wasn't in the future for me. But then when I got married, my husband is 7 years younger. So for him was like a very open decision, like a very open option. I mean, before getting married, we discussed that. And I was very honest. I was like, I don't even know if I can get pregnant. Maybe it's not going to happen. And he was very clear, like, I would like kids, but if it doesn't happen, it's not a deal breaker. I had to get my mind again into, okay, so this is now an option again in my life. And was a decision that also had to be taken quite quickly because I didn't have a lot of time in my hands to play with.
It's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. And also because we were like recently married and everything. So everything had to happen, like the transition and adjusting to each other, and then deciding to have kids. Everything had to happen like very quickly. But yes, at the end, like was a search of this is a true desire, and getting God involved as well. Like God is up for families to grow. And how is that going to look like for us?
For Anna and her husband, this wound up looking like a long, sometimes dispiriting wait. It took 2 years for them to fall pregnant.
I never tried to get pregnant before, and I started to try when I was 41. So a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes like you are in a high that it's fine, and sometimes you are in a low that maybe this is not going to happen. In 2 years, many other women get pregnant except you. Every time that someone will ask me, I was like, oh, if it happens, it's fine. If it doesn't happen, it's fine. Like trying to be on the fence. And someone told me, like, if you really want this, you need to put your mindset intentionally for that. Like your head and your heart they both have to be there. And that's something that confronted me and I needed to change.
So how did you grapple with the overwhelming feelings, I'm sure, that you felt at the pace of all of this, if not the decision itself? How did you go about kind of being okay with the path that you wanted to pursue?
For me, I always have to have like my head around it in this is the cost that is gonna have in my life. Like, for example, having kids, I'm not gonna sleep. Being like older, to have a kid that maybe I'm not going to have as much energy if I was a mom in early 30s or late 20s. All of these things that I needed to come into an agreement of, okay, this is the cost that we are going to pay. And there is a risk as well, like as you get older, there are more risks. And come to terms with all of that. But also, for me, in the middle of my faith, was saying, God, if you are this and having children is something that you have for me, you are not only going to give me the kid, but you are going to make the path for everything else for the next whatever amount of years he's going to have.
That must feel very scary, right? To sort of embrace a future that you can't control, to embrace the situation that you don't have much control over. You have to just walk that path. You're 8 months pregnant right now, and when we're speaking, so the future is coming at you. How are you feeling today about the decision that you made, and what have you learnt from it?
Well, now it's a combination, like we are both very excited about like the baby coming, and thank God all the exams and everything, he's coming healthy and fine. So that's very reassuring. But of course, I believe that from now until, he becomes an adult, it will be that constant, in a way, a fear of the unknown, of how is it going to look like now, just when he arrives here, we don't have like close family that is going to help us. So everything is going to be on our own. Or now our weekends, our routine, our work life, everything. We are also very expectant of the reward, like in terms of this is what we prayed for and what we work for in a way, like, so we can also trust in God that he's going to provide us with the resources to keep going and make it work.
I wonder, listening to Anna there, what traits you'd say she's demonstrated over the last few years of so much personal upheaval. She's spoken about her belief in God, so perhaps you'd say she's demonstrating faith or trust. And she's also talked about being expectant and excited for her new baby to arrive. So Justine, she's also full of hope.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even though our emphasis today might be to put hope in that personality traits category, an earlier tradition would actually have called that a virtue. And here we arrive, I think, at the core of what Alan says is absolutely essential for living in chaotic times today, the virtues, even if this language sounds quite strange and old-fashioned today. We prefer productivity tips and life hacks, bits of life advice here and there and that we can pick and mix from, not a complete vision of life, what philosophers call a vision of the good. But here's the problem, according to Alan.
When you think about hacks, it doesn't matter how you are oriented. You can be just hacking your way towards whatever you're doing, and you don't have to be oriented toward what Aristotle, what Thomas Aquinas, what Augustine, what all these great church fathers and classical philosophers would have called the good. You don't have to be oriented toward that. You could just be saying, I'm just going to pursue whatever feels good to me because all I'm trying to do is maximize my self-pleasure. That's it. But the position, the posture that I'm talking about is moving your body, moving your mind, moving your habits toward what is actually objectively good so that you can move your life toward what you were created to be. And that is a different prospect than just, here are Alan's 7 tips for more pleasant living.
But this is where all the difficulty lies, right? Because we've thrown out all the kind of established rules. Like there's no more shared vision for what the good actually is. Everyone has a different version of that. We sort of put an added extra burden on the individual to define their own good and then go in pursuit of that. So how do you put words like character and virtue on the map for people? They feel so old-fashioned. They feel like they are conscripting you into a bigger definition of the good that you may not actually embrace for yourself.
Right. Yeah. So one way of understanding these things like character and virtue is we just end up saying, well, these are free-floating concepts without any definition of the good, right? And we each just have to pull our own definition off the shelf. Then we're back to TikTok gurus and really just following our own heart. The image I use for this book comes from T.S. Eliot from The Wasteland. He says in The Wasteland that we know only a heap of broken images. And that's what I've kind of been talking about with all these voices talking at us, saying that we've just got all these different things to say and no coherent message. Well, what I want to argue is when we understand that this good comes from God, we're actually given a coherent picture, and it's a beautiful picture. And that's one worth pursuing.
Okay, let's talk about the virtues themselves. Could you outline them for us and give us a quick sketch of what they mean?
Yeah. So the first 4 are the cardinal virtues. That means they're the hinge virtues that Aristotle, for example, taught on. Those include prudence, which is practical wisdom. So that includes things like buying a car to choosing someone to marry. The second is justice, giving each person his or her due. The third is fortitude or courage. The fourth is temperance. It's not just moderation. It can be moderation, but it's also the inner order of our lives. And the last 3 virtues are the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. And all other virtues will fit under those virtues. So it's a good list to understand the basics of living well.
The reason there are 4 cardinal virtues, prudence, fortitude, temperance, and justice, and then 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, is because the medieval philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas merged Platonic and Aristotelian ethics with Christian theology. Think of it this way. The cardinal virtues are acquired through human effort. With enough work and practice, they're within anyone's reach. But the theological virtues are different. They're relational. They're responses to God's activity in the world. That's how the thinking goes. And so they're less to do with what we bring to the table. Back to Alan for how faith, hope, and love round out the virtues.
Faith is important to human life. We have to believe in something or someone. And the definition of faith that I work with in this book is belief in someone, not belief in some text per se, but actually belief in someone. And belief is important to our existence. It's important to the way we navigate the world. If we can't believe in someone, it's difficult for us to have the confidence to move through the world. And speaking of other virtues, have hope, have understanding, have confidence. So faith
So it's not just the people who are religious per se, who are people of faith. That's everyone.
Right. Everyone has faith. The only question is, what do you have faith in?
Yeah.
And faith points you towards what you worship, right? And hope, we know hope is so important. Hope is one of the most important virtues for our present moment. There are so many people who I think live in despair right now. There are two vices that come with hope. One is presumption. That's when you think that everything is perfectly okay and there's no reason that you need to hope. As an example of that, some people who think that AI is going to fix all of our problems and we're all going to be saved by it, that would be the sin of presumption. Those people are, I think, delusional, that think AI is going to fix absolutely everything and we're going to live in a utopia. The other vice, and this is the one most of us fall into because we aren't billionaires and so we can't afford to have that sin, is despair. And that's when we think the climate is so bad, there's no hope for us. And so we just curl up and we don't even recycle because we think there's just no point anymore. Nothing's going to change. My actions aren't going to make a difference anymore. Or we think I can't even get a job, so there's no point in applying. Politics are just so chaotic. There's no point in me trying, whatever it might be. So hope is so important for human life. Choosing to have a child in today's world is a great act of hope because it's saying, I can't promise this child that they're going to come into a world that is safe. In fact, I have very good reason to believe that it's not safe. But I'm going to choose to bring them into this world hoping that they will be cared for. That's an act of hope. So hope is really important. And then love, what would we do without love, right? What would we do without love? Love is at the center of being human. Love, as I talk about in the book, is saying to someone or something, how great you exist, how wonderful that you are. And I'm getting this from a philosopher named Joseph Pieper. And just affirming the existence of something, just delighting in the fact that they exist. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that the Pieper quote was particularly profound given that we so link our being in the world with our achievements, right? And that pressure to kind of live that big life. Whereas even just affirming the fact that someone exists, I mean, this certainly explains how I feel about my children, how I feel about my friends.
Yes.
Even if I was to say, okay, I like you because you're kind or you're funny, even those characteristics, they're all like little tiny bites. They don't encompass the whole meal, I suppose, of why you would love that other person. So it really named something that I think is really real.
Yeah, I agree.
Talk to me about which virtues are the hardest today.
So I think two are particularly difficult, and because they're particularly difficult, I think they're also particularly important in our world, and those would be fortitude or courage and temperance. So let me talk about temperance first. Our culture, our consumer service product addiction culture is inclined to make us say yes to everything. I don't know how it is there, but here in America, we have what I'm increasingly convinced is an addiction culture between sports gambling, pornography, various...
Sports gambling is massive here.
Okay, yeah. Various narcotics, video games, which video games in moderation, I don't think are bad, but we have to admit there's addiction too. There's so many people addicted to so many different things. And I didn't even mention smartphones and social media. Look, everyone seems to be addicted to something. That's concerning. And it's intentional as well, right? There are people whose job it is to get us addicted to substances and devices and products and services. We've always had addictions in human history. We haven't always had people who get degrees and are, spending their time
An economy
of addiction.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right? And terrifying. So when you're growing up in that environment, to say yes to your indulgences and never really to say no, having temperance, rightly ordering your desires is incredibly hard. We just don't use that muscle, right? And virtues are all about habits. It's not a list of moral standards. It's not like a list of rules. Not that there's anything wrong with rules. They have their place, but that's not what virtues are. They're habits that you do. So are you doing those habits? Are you exercising those muscles if you are taught to say yes to everything that you're doing? Or are they becoming atrophied because you're just giving in to your desires? And so that really concerns me. And I think the solution to that is taking stock. And this is what I talk about in the book, is slowing down, recognizing there are active agents in the world who are trying to addict you to things and don't want you to moderate. And so take the time to slow down and evaluate, what am I doing each day? And is this a good use of my time, my resources, my mental energy, my space? Is this honoring to God? Is this loving to my neighbor? Is this good for my body and my mind, my soul? And then make changes, exercise that muscle step by step. And then courage is another one. I mean, the statistics on dating, young people in America are dating less and less. There are also fewer social interactions. We're not going out to dinner as much. We're not engaging as much in face-to-face interactions. We're not getting married at the same rate. There's just less engagement, period. Also, interestingly, there's a lower number of people getting driver's licenses.
Wow.
Yeah. Or they're delaying at least getting driver's licenses. So I find that interesting. And I want to tie this to that inhibition that I mentioned earlier. I think here the virtue of courage or fortitude can come in to help us, because where inhibition comes in and whispers in your ear, you're unworthy, you're inadequate, you're never going to amount to anything, this person doesn't want to be your friend or doesn't want to go on a date with you, or you'll get in a car accident, or whatever the fears might be, courage is this: risking or experiencing suffering for the sake of the good. That's what courage is. And so courage would allow you to say, you know what, this friendship or potential friendship is worth this person saying, no, I don't want to go to coffee with you. It's worth it. Or, out on a date. It's worth it. And so you have to take that step towards the block, towards the action, and do something, risk something. We are a very risk-averse culture. Jonathan Haidt talks about how for younger generations, we've overprotected our children in the real world and underprotected them in the online world. I think that's true. And as a result, we have many people who have not had the opportunity. I'm not criticizing them. I just think they have not had the opportunity to exercise that virtue of courage. And so now is the time to exercise that virtue, to make the choice to exercise that virtue of courage.
Let's go back to those we spoke to. Remember Jordan, the woodwork teacher who took a teaching support role because he had to leave his other job quickly? Then his confidence took an even bigger blow as he applied for a succession of jobs. I asked Jordan whether he associated the word courage with what he went through in that tough time, even though we typically associate that with the battlefield.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember saying to someone, I feel like I don't deserve to be as stressed as I am, because, people were, in battles. Like, that was the actual example I used. People have been in battles, people have been in wars, people are actually suffering from real PTSD. But it's all relative, was what that person responded to me with. And I was kind of like, yeah, well, fair enough. I think that is true for this situation too, is I've had to, in my own way, kind of push through this desire to curl up into a ball and just, let the stress crush me, and continue to show up and sometimes feel very not great, and continue to put myself in situations where I, have to be on the receiving end of feeling that lack of confidence and that high amount of stress, and being able to kind of operate and being able to fight that battle to regain that sense of confidence for myself. So I think, yeah, potentially a little bit of courage was shown in order for me to get to the place that I am.
Maybe courage looks like managing our own fears and anxiety in the face of uncertainty. Here's Sophia, the psychology graduate, who spent an agonising year looking for work, but is now 6 months into her new position and loving it. I asked her if she feels better equipped to go through a similar experience again.
I think I'm probably going to feel the exact same things. Just because I've done it once, it's not going to soften the blow of next time. But I do think knowing that I've done it before will be helpful. I think I've always been the kind of person to not enjoy comfortableness. And so making sure that I'm constantly building up resilience and putting myself in new situations, whether that's finding a new job, whether that's starting new study, whether that's, trying a skill that I haven't tried before. I think building up that resistance so that when I do face these more difficult, unsure times, I feel a little bit more used to the uncomfortableness.
You've used that muscle before.
Yeah.
As for Anna, she's taking on the new as it comes so she can embrace the life she's surprised to find herself living.
I think that I've had to learn to become very open and flexible in that and not hold myself to a specific version of who I am and not feel that I'm losing myself as well when, for example, when my husband came into my space, because he moved into my apartment and suddenly I had someone else sharing my space. But more okay, something new of myself is coming up. I'm reshaping myself to this new stage, the new season. And in a way, that's how it's going to be with the baby. It's going to be a new season. I had never been a wife and now I'm a wife. I've never been a mother and now I'm going to be a mother. So new things are going to pop up. And yeah, it's just a new version of the same old.
You've heard from Anna, Sophia, Brodie and Jordan that they spoke to other people, sometimes plenty of other people, to gain perspective on the decision they were facing. So let's go back to Alan. Does he have any advice for young people on how to look for mentors?
You're going to want to look for people who are usually older. And so look for people in churches, in schools, look for professors who seem to have time and wisdom. It could be people in your workplace. It could be neighbors. Part of the challenge here is that we don't have a lot of institutions where we rub shoulders with people who are older and could be mentors. In previous generations, we had social clubs, we had, bowling leagues, we had different things where you could meet other people and form friendships and mentorships and have that possibility. But a lot of those institutions, those mediating institutions, have broken down. And so that makes it difficult because what you're left with often is, if you don't go to church, you're left with school and you're left with work. And that's challenging, honestly. So what I would say is that you're going to have to take the initiative. If you want to find a mentor, you're going to have to take the initiative. If there's somebody in your neighborhood who looks wise, you're going to have to go out and make friends with them. Our society is no longer set up so that it's easy for you to just get a mentor unless you're involved in a church or some other kind of club or social organization. That's just the reality of our situation.
Yeah, so more courage is called for in that sense, in terms of that, being proactive.
It is, yeah.
Now I'm wondering, what would you tell your younger self, casting about for wisdom, for guidance? Because the Alan Noble that I'm speaking to is 3 children in, 4 books in, soon to be 5. What would you tell your younger self?
I would definitely speak to that question of inadequacy. I definitely felt inadequate. I definitely felt insecure and definitely felt like my task was to become worthy of someone's attention, someone's appreciation, someone's validity, some sort of validation from somebody else. And if I didn't get that, then I was insecure. What I needed to hear was that my identity was not based in that, but in Christ. And I didn't need to keep searching for that. I needed a wise mentor to come along and say, Alan, you are going to be fine. Spend your time developing your skills, developing your talents. Don't be anxious because you're okay. That's good enough. God is honored by you developing your talents and your skills. That's what pleases him. That's what I needed to hear, and I didn't hear that.
It is good that you exist. That's what you needed to hear.
Yeah, that's what I needed to hear.
So is that what you would say to young people right now who face, to call back to an earlier book of yours, who face the challenge of getting out of bed, or who face a paralyzing choice they need to make, or feel like they need to make a leap? Is that what you would say to them?
I mean, that's what I have said to them, to many students, and it helps. It honestly helps, because I've found that in many cases, people have never heard that. They have never heard that. And hearing that and hearing somebody say, I'm proud of you, is powerful.
That was Alan Noble, in a way reminding us that there's a mentor in all of us, which is what Brodie is discovering each day in the classroom. He decided not to finish the law degree after all. Instead, he's pursuing a Masters of Teaching and has been working in a school, and he's loving it.
It is so fulfilled my expectations. I definitely expected it to be social. I expected to have an impact on students' life, which was tangible and positive. But I didn't realise so much of the job is just going to be conversation. Just how you actually treat a student changes them so much. Just seeing, especially these young boys who they grow up, they're quite unsure of who they are. They're figuring out who they are, and they may not have a lot of positive older influence in their life. Being that, and being the positive older influence, being able to believe in a younger student and actually like them and like being around them, and seeing their learning, their desire and passion for school and their belief in themselves grow has been so fulfilling. And one of the most rewarding things about teaching, probably the most rewarding thing about teaching, is seeing a student start to believe in themselves. And it's so fulfilling and so beautiful, which is great.
Have you had people talk to you about the decision you made and sort of tell you that they're proud of you for how you handled it?
My parents have, which is really nice. It's always lovely to hear from, your mother and your father. I'm proud of you. It's one of the best things to hear. They've definitely told me, I'm proud of you for taking that step. That was a big change and a big step up in life to do two things at the same time. And they say to me, I can tell that you are so much happier, that you're so much more fulfilled, and you're actually doing what you want to do. And it's great when, the closest people in your life are telling you that. And that definitely reaffirms to me, I feel like I've made the right decision.
You've been listening to Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart, and Justine Toe.
Thanks to Alan Noble and to Sophia and Anna and Brodie and Jordan for talking to us about the highs and lows and the incredible stresses of making big life decisions. Alan's book is To Live Well, Practical Wisdom for Moving Through Chaotic Times. And I will post links to that and his other work as well.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of Life and Faith, please do send it on to someone you think would enjoy it too. And leave us a rating or review. It helps other people discover Life and Faith. Thanks to our producer, the incredibly decisive Alan Douthwaite. Next time.
We did a segment for ages called Years of Your Life, I think it was called. And each week we'd select a particular year, and people would ring up about, that might have been the year they got married, or it might have been the year of the birth of the first child. Sometimes people would respond to news events, and it was the year of the Granville train disaster, and someone rang up and said, I was the nurse that looked after the most seriously injured person of them all. And she said the other thing was we were both exactly the same age. We were both 26. I just wondered, we got her out of hospital, but how did she go? Did she manage to have children? Did she manage to go on to have a career? I've always just wondered about her.
Someone calls up.
You know what's going to happen next, And she rang in, and I have enough sense to turn off my microphone, and the two of them talk. And yes, she did have children, and she did have a career. Can't sort of have that experience in any other medium, really.